Hi and welcome to the Bookkeepers podcast. I'm Zoe Whitman. I'm here with Jo Woods and we're joined today by our guest Jane Pangbourne, who is the founder of Menopausal, Not Mad. Hi Jane, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for asking me about my favourite topic, which I know you're going to introduce now.
Absolutely. We can't wait for this, and Jo is particularly excited from behind the scenes. We've got so many questions about this. Bit of an interesting, potentially, topic for our audience. Want to make sure that everyone who's listening knows this is super relevant. We're a very female community. There are lots of guys in our group as well, and we're just aware. Like we're both in our 40s. We're building businesses. Changes in your health at this sort of time in your life can affect your performance, your relationships, your health. And we thought this would be a really good conversation to have. So, Jane, do you want to start by telling us a little bit about what you do?
Yes, indeed. So my name is Jane Pangbourne. I am the founder of Menopausal, Not Mad. I suppose my elevator pitch would be, it's a lot longer than this, but it would be I help women to effectively and safely manage their HRT regimes. There's a lot more to it than that, but that kind of summarizes. My world is HRT, which for those who don't know it is hormone replacement therapy.
So Jane, me and you met because we've both been part of this Meta Facebook initiative because we're both, with Zoe as well, we're growing communities. So we've got the Six Figure Bookkeepers Club. What's your community called?
So my community is called the HRT Truth Collective. At the moment, we are, I think, just coming up to 32,000 globally. We get about an extra 1,000 to 1,200 female members a month. So it's busy. And all we talk about in there is HRT. We do have a little bit of a touch on other women's health elements as well. But that particular group is just HRT. And women come into the community various stages of menopause. Most often it's women who come in saying, oh my God, what the hell's happening? I don't know what to do. So we start there. There's the little newbies, our little babies. And then we have the sort of other side of the spectrum where the other half of the community is generally women who've been on HRT for a while or even for a long time. Things have changed and they might want to make some changes to their regime. The doctor doesn't necessarily know what's happening. So therefore they're asking for advice. So they're kind of two ends of the spectrum really in our community.
And I think it's safe to say that, like, as a nation, this really has started to come to light recently, more and more in the media. I mean, I remember that back in the early 90s, there was all this scaremongering about HRT and these incorrect links to breast cancer. So I remember, my experience with my mum. She was like, "Oh, I'm not touching it," because she was scaremongered by. And then obviously we've got Davina McCall's been coming more and more into the media, and other people. The conversations have started, and so we felt it was really important because we are a massively female community, but we've got guys here too. And it's so important for the guys to understand because we're not just talking about, and even if you're a young woman here or if you've already been through the menopause, and it doesn't matter where you're at, because it's not just about your own health. It's about the people around you, family members, maybe staff, maybe suppliers. It doesn't matter. We're always interacting. And it's really good to understand and have this knowledge, even if it's a basic knowledge about maybe what someone else is going through. And we've heard some, Zoe, I think, she spoke to me recently about somebody that she knew that was having kind of, I think, feelings of like, oh, well, that's just life. And I'm not going to be able to go for a promotion now because this is the way my body is. And we were like, oh, no, that's really. So we want to start having, these conversations and making it not kind of, something that we talk about behind. Because, and what I was saying to Jane is that when I've had conversations, we've been to networking events face to face, as soon as the event's over, me and some of the bookkeepers are chatting, this comes up all the time, face to face, but we don't really talk about it again in person on a digital level. So we thought, let's break that mold and let's have a chat. So for everybody that's listening, that doesn't matter if they're going through this and experiencing this, it is really important to understand this, because it's going to affect somebody that you know at some point.
It is. I've written down about 15 things that I want to talk about from what you've just said, Jo, because there's so much to say. And I apologise in advance because once I'm on my topic, I tend to ramble. So feel free to interrupt me because I get really passionate about it. I want to address your first one of your comments, sorry, about men. So go back to that, and I am going to address your last question in a second. Absolutely vital that men understand. I do have a men page, a little men blog, men and the menopause, on my website if anybody wants to just pop on there in the blog section. It's interesting because you'll get, again, two ends of the spectrum. You'll have some men that desperately want to know, and they desperately want to help their partners or their mothers or their sisters or their friend. And then other men are like, oh, don't talk about vaginas. Oh my God, we don't say that word. That's so scary. And I must say the word vagina about 500 times a day. So it's kind of normal speak in my world, but I appreciate it's kind of difficult for some people. Men need to be given the opportunity to support women. So just that basic knowledge is often enough. And I don't mean men can only digest basic knowledge. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is they don't really need to know all the details of it, because actually as long as they've got an understanding of what's happening to the person that they love, then they can usually support. So yeah, 100%. However, having said that, my community is female only, just from a safety perspective and from a reassurance perspective. That's better for that particular community. I haven't discounted having a men's group though, so just throwing that out there. Just in terms of age, it's not just we older birds like me. So I'm 56 now, and it's not just that midlife. I can't bear that word, by the way, midlife stage of life. I have some women in my community who are in their 20s who are menopausal for various surgical reasons, health reasons, genetic reasons. And they need the same support that women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. My oldest client is nearly 90 now. So, it just all ends of the spectrum are important to consider. I know I'm rambling now, but I am addressing the things that you just said, Jo. So then in terms of the history, the reason we are where we are with the whole scaremongering about HRT is terrible for you, HRT is going to give you breast cancer. It's a natural thing that we go through menopause. We shouldn't mess with nature. Oh, that all just gives me palpitations. I can't bear it. So we were actually doing quite well with the development of HRT until about 22, 23 years ago, when the Women's Health Initiative study was leaked before it had been properly assessed. And essentially, there was a tiny little bit of information that related to breast cancer. And of course, the media got hold of it. And everybody was told in the media, you're all going to get breast cancer because you're on HRT. And we were actually doing quite well up to that point. And estrogen was known to be a really protective, anti-inflammatory hormone. And as we age, we lose our estrogen because our ovaries just stop working eventually, hence menopausal. And so we're more at risk of things like cardiovascular problems, osteoporosis, dementia, diabetes, depression, because our bodies just don't cope very well with having the low estrogen. So now we're kind of clawing back after that study, we're clawing back the good stuff about HRT, and we're now, we realised a long time ago, but we're now hopefully a bit more aware that HRT is very protective, very good for us. It helps us it helps all the cells in our body. Almost every cell in your body has an estrogen receptor attached to it. So you could have anything from sore ankles to a foggy brain to a dry vagina. So yes, we say the word vagina yet again. And your periods may or may not be there while you're perimenopausal. They come, they go. So loads and loads and loads of symptoms can be down to being perimenopausal. And sadly, we're now, well, not now, we have been told that it's okay, it's just part of aging. Well, it's not okay. So that do something about it.
Jane, can I'm going to sound really ignorant here, but can we go back to basics for people who maybe aren't familiar? I don't know at what point you would have HRT or you'd have that conversation. And I think there are some words even before that about the difference between being menopausal and perimenopause and what that means. And generally, I'm 40 and I have conversations about this with my friendship group, but I don't know when to expect this to happen. It's certainly not something my mum would want to talk to me about. So I just for people, other women in the group, guys who are in the group, what do these terms mean? And yeah, that would be really helpful sort of groundwork for me.
No problem. Perimenopause is the time when your body is getting ready to be for your periods to stop and for you to no longer be fertile. So you'll probably experience a lot of fluctuations in your mood and in symptoms coming and going. So essentially, if it was on a graph, oh, that sounds quite, that's not my world, graphs. But anyway, hopefully that fits in with your audience. Anyway, if you were looking at a graph, which I never do, your hormones would be doing this the whole time, which they kind of do anyway throughout the month, but it's a bit more strategic and a bit more planned out. Whereas when your estrogen is reducing and your progesterone is reducing, and then it goes up again and goes down again, there's a lot of this going on throughout the month. So you'll probably find, and often it's retrospectively, you'll look back, and I certainly did, because I think I was perimenopausal when I was about 37, 38. I had no idea what was going on. I thought you took hormone replacement therapy to look younger. So that's what I thought in my 20s and 30s. But regardless, if I look back retrospectively, I know that my lack of libido, my fluctuating bouts of anger. I mean, I'm not an angry person, but my fluctuating anger and a general wasn't even a depression. It was just tearful and just starting to feel really odd, not unhappy, but just strange. So for me, I retrospectively can see that was the beginning of my perimenopause. Now, there are so many different symptoms that could occur for any of us, that it's difficult to pinpoint it. So I usually would say to a woman, okay, you've come to me because you're feeling different, you're not feeling good. Let's talk about what that is. So she might say, well, my periods are really erratic, I cry a lot, my skin's really dry, my hair's falling out, any number of about 40 or 50 symptoms. And on their own, those symptoms might be seen as something very sort of normal. It's just, oh, you're a bit stressed, or you've had a bit of a cold, so no wonder your skin's dry, or whatever. There can always be something else that's the cause. But when we start to pull the picture together and we'll say, well, actually, for example, a woman might say to me, I leak when I go to when I've been to the toilet, I stand up and then I leak, and I obviously haven't been properly, or I can't get to the toilet in time. And so I'll say, okay, so there's obviously some bladder issue. And then she'll say, well, is that normal? Well, it's common, but it's not normal. And then she'll say, oh, but I've always been like that. So that's when I'll say, well, look, okay, when you say always, do you mean for the whole of your life, or since you were 10, or since you were 12, or since you were 30? And most often in those situations, and not necessarily just with that symptom, she will say, well, now you mention it, probably the last 5 or 6 years, and let's assume this woman's 47. I'll go, well, okay, so it's not forever. It's not the whole of your life, but it feels like it, because we just absorb those symptoms and we go, oh, well, that's just me. But actually it isn't, because something changed a few years ago and now it's just you. And that's back to what we were saying. I can't remember before or when you first asked me some questions, Joe, but we just have this mindset where we'll say, or we're told, well, it's just because, that's what happens when you get older. Well, is it? So you're okay just peeing yourself on a regular basis? That's okay, is it? No. So that's fine. So we can do something about that. And I really I'm really frustrated when women say, Zoe, when women sort of say, oh, well, but it's just natural. It's just what happens and it's fine. I'm okay. Are you okay? Is that how you normally are? And it can be any number of symptoms, but if it's changed for you and it's different for you, then let's start looking at the bigger picture and just kind of see whether or not you are perimenopausal. If you are, then let's talk about hormone replacement therapy. And in direct answer to your question, Zoe, because I know I haven't answered it properly, if you are perimenopausal, then the sooner you add in the estrogen and progesterone mix that you need, the better, because you're giving yourself that protection at a younger age, rather than waiting until you're post-menopausal, when your periods have stopped and you've been stopped for 12 months or more. And that's when some of the degeneration, let's say bone degeneration as an example, has already happened, has already started. We want to catch you before then and get you nice and balanced, so that when you become postmenopausal, it's, you know, it's plain sailing after that.
It's so fascinating, and I think exactly like what Zoe said, we have these conversations, but because we are so good at multitasking and just getting on with stuff, and if as well, maybe you've had children, maybe you haven't, whatever, but your body's changed. Like, I know my husband's still got clothes like from when we met 25 years ago. It's the same, it still fits exactly, you know, like, oh, this jumper was nice and expensive, I can wear it forever. Do we have that? No, we go through so much changes. We're very, you know, we change all the time. So we do get used to little things. And the thing about this is that they are kind of little things that you think, oh, I can deal with. And it was only that, so me and you jumped on a call to talk about Facebook communities. Well, that didn't last for long, because Jane started, I was like, oh, well, I don't think, oh, no. And then she just asked me these questions. And do you know what my first symptom was again, back when I was like 36, 37, I went to the opticians and they said, oh, you've got dry eyes. And I was like, have I? They don't feel dry. I still cry. And they're like, oh, no, it's not the same as that. You need to have these drops. And I was like, really, do I? So that was the first symptom that I didn't even know was a symptom that someone else could see. And now I've understood that it's a different thing. And that's why, and something I noticed over, it didn't start then, but maybe a few years ago, that my eyes would just water if I went outside or if there was any wind, because my eyes were trying to make them not dry. So in my mind, I'm like, they're not dry. Look at all the water coming up. It's a different type. And I've had to learn this stuff. So I think you have to be kind of curious. One of my biggest symptoms was a headache that never went away. And it was only when I started HRT that it went. And I was like, but I've just lived with a headache because I'm stressed. I've got this going on. I've got dry eyes. Don't wear my glasses enough. I made all of these excuses. And I think we're very used to just kind of making excuses for things. When we actually got talking, I mean, the fact that I ache from head to toe every day and I have bone aches. Well, I got told years and years ago I had fibromyalgia. So I assumed it was that. No, actually, that's gone as well. So it's really interesting. But like you say, what you've just said, and this is why I'm always learning, is that you said about estrogen and how many receptors in the body. So no wonder the list is mental. And what's the funny thing as well is that the symptoms come and go. So I had a bout of about 3 months where I'd wake in the night and I would be like night sweats. And then it just disappeared and I never had them again. And I'm like, you just feel like you're going a bit mad. And then you stop thinking that you should go and see a doctor. And then I actually did go and see my doctor and they said, we're not going to talk to you or look at you or do anything until you're 45. Bye-bye, go away. Which was really disheartening. And I'd waited. So it took me all of that effort and, you know, should I talk to someone? And it was November last year. I remember it was the day of our book launch, Zoe, and the doctor phoned me at 8 a.m. in the morning as I was getting ready to go to the Shard to do our book launch. And I remember it so because she phoned me and she said, but you're not 45, so we're not going to help you at the moment. And I really felt so sad because I knew that, potentially could be, it actually took me until I spoke to you, until about March this year to make a start getting, and it really has made improvements. But there's still, this is why it feels like a bit of a sordid subject, because if your GP is going to turn you away and say, like, make you feel like it's all in your head, and that it's not a real thing, then so someone, maybe you're listening today, maybe you're in your 20s, maybe you're in your 50s, doesn't matter, and you listen to some of the things we said and you think, oh, maybe there's something going on there. So should you go to your GP? And if you're going to go to your GP, how could I have been better prepared to have that conversation?
Okay, so it's quite a difficult one, this, because I I'm not into GP bashing, and I'm certainly not negative about the NHS. They have a really, really difficult job to do. But we're in the situation where, through no fault of their own, GPs have not been trained in menopause. So GPs, a lot of them will admit, I don't know anything about HRT, or I don't know anything about menopause or perimenopause. So they'll either make some of them are excellent. I will precursor this by saying that. Some of them have really gone out of their way to learn what they need to learn. But you'll either get a response of, like you had, Joe, you're not old enough, you're too young, you can't possibly be perimenopausal. You can't be perimenopausal because you're still having periods, which is a clear misunderstanding of what perimenopause is, because you're still having periods when you're perimenopausal. You're not menopausal when your periods have stopped. HRT, I don't believe in HRT, would be another thing a doctor might say to you. It's very dangerous. This is common. It's common for women to feel that way. Suck it up. I've had that been said to people. So there are lots of different responses. However, my approach is more positive than it may sound, whereas we try to get our community, either one-to-one or in the group community, prepared for those conversations. So of course you need to see your doctor. You can't just buy HRT any old place. You can actually get it from online pharmacies, but you still need a prescription anyway. And in foreign countries, other countries other than the UK, yes, you can buy it over the counter, but I'm not recommending that, because I do want whoever it is accessing the HRT to be monitored. It's important that you have somebody keeping an eye on you, making sure that you're doing the right thing. We have scooped up a lot of people in our group who have been badly managed with their HRT, but mostly doctors really, really want this to work for their patients. So you said about research, Joe, and looking into things a bit further. Everybody's different, so is quite difficult to that starting point. But if you can convince your doctor that you are perimenopausal, then the HRT conversation is actually really easy. There's plenty of information on the website and in our group, and we will just tell you what to ask for. It's quite simple. We're in there all the time. There's a team of about 20 of us, and we just give direct information to people based on their individual situation. We're not diagnosing, and we're not recommending that they, as I say, go and buy it from somewhere else, but it's something then for them to go to the doctor and say, look, these are my symptoms. Look at the symptoms list on the website. These are the symptoms. I really want to try HRT, regardless of, I tend to take the broken record approach, regardless of the response from your doctor. You are in charge of your body. So my response, if they come back and say, oh no, we're not going to prescribe you HRT, is I hear you, but I would like to try HRT. And this is the HRT I would like. And the HRT that I would normally recommend, there are loads and loads of different ones, but there's I don't really like this phrase, but there's a sort of gold standard HRT, which doesn't mean the others are no good. So if you're not on this, don't panic. But the estrogen gel with the progesterone tablets are known to have now realised in studies that they've done that there are no additional risks. There's no blood clot risk. There's no breast cancer risk. There's no risk of anything terrible happening to you at all if you take this HRT. And we keep reminding our community that replacing your hormones in the way that we suggest with regulated, evidenced HRT is not something to be ashamed of, and it's not something to be frightened of. All we're doing is replacing the hormones that our body, through age, usually, obviously it could be surgical or medical, but our body has decided we no longer need. And the reason our body has decided that is because in the old days we would have been dead before we were perimenopausal, and now we're much better off. We live to a longer age. So no offense, nature, but we're not going down that route. We've got other plans for the rest of our lives.
And do you know what? That's so interesting. I heard someone say this the other day, and it really made me like cement this whole idea of not having this shame around having to take HRT. So when a type 1 diabetic and their pancreas stops creating insulin, which is a hormone, they're given insulin. And our ovaries have stopped creating estrogen, so we're just replacing it. And I'm like, why has it been made such a bad thing? It just makes sense, doesn't it? And it's just happening to more people because it's women of a certain, when it happens.
And it's frustrating to me when I go to the chemist to pick up my delightful HRT. Obviously I have it by the truckload. No, I don't really, but I just get my monthly or 2 monthly supply. And on the counter, even though we have to fight for our HRT, still under the counter, just in front, full view, facing outwards, is all that lovely Viagra for all those men that need it for their libido. And I'm happy for the men that they can get that. But why do we then have to fight for testosterone when we need it? Because we also lose our testosterone as well as our estrogen and progesterone. So, but we're told, oh no, women don't need testosterone. And that's blatantly not true. In fact, our ovaries produce 3 or 4 times more testosterone than estrogen. So that's a whole new conversation.
Oh my gosh, it's definitely a school day for me. It's really interesting, and obviously there's no blanket advice here on the podcast. Speak to your GP, make an appointment if you feel like any of these symptoms are things that are coming up for you, and to talk about whether it's the right thing for you. And also, you made me think about, people used to just die before they got to this age. You'd also hear, don't remember what I was listening to, but I was listening to like a podcast from like olden times, and there's like a mad aunt locked in the loft, probably menopausal, probably that. So do you think that was a thing?
You're right, Zoe, actually. And I wrote an article about 2 years ago on the website. I think it's on the website called oh god, it's a big long title I gave it, but basically it's about the history of how women were treated and put into institutions. And it's absolutely heartbreaking when you read all their symptoms and why they were put in the institutions. And quite often they were put in the institution because one woman was put in, I think, because she was a little bit angry, spoke sternly to her husband. So obviously that's a completely different world. But regardless, all the symptoms they were coming up with were things that you would actually now go, oh yeah, that's probably hormones, that she was that sort of age, maybe in her 40s or 30s, probably 30s actually in those days. But yeah, it's happened all the time. I mean, we don't tend to institutionalize women who are perimenopausal now, to be fair, but yeah, it's certainly happened in the past.
What are some, if you're thinking, actually, I'd like to think about whether there's some kind of alternative way to cope with this, like changes in my mood or changes with something I'm feeling. What other alternative solutions might there be for people?
Oh, Zoe, you've just said alternatives to HRT. I can't believe you just said that to me.
I'm really sorry.
I'm having palpitations that you asked me that, but no, I
feel like, my first port of call might be like, do I need to try some vitamins? Like, I know that sounds nuts, but like, I have skincare vitamins in my desk. It's there's no lie. So.
Okay, so vitamins are all good, but they're not going to replace your estrogen. Estrogen is people go, I'm going down the natural route. Great. Fill your boots with it. It's not going to replace your estrogen. Might make you feel a little bit better. And there are some things, which I'll talk about in a second, which will make you feel a bit better in those early stages. But none of them are going to replace your estrogen and give you that long-term protection against osteoporosis, heart disease, and the things I mentioned earlier. So it isn't actually just about symptoms. I'm looking at that long-term health. So even if somebody came to me, she was postmenopausal, hadn't had a period for 5 years, and I've had a few recently, my community have come to me with that, and they've said, oh, but I don't really have any symptoms, but I think maybe I should consider HRT. And I've said, if that's what you want to do, I wholly advocate it, because even if you don't have symptoms, doesn't mean that you're not at risk of those sort of silent elements, osteoporosis, etc. So it's still worth considering. However, if you really don't want to go down the HRT route, or you're not quite ready to do that yet, and you are perimenopausal, Then if you want to, you could choose one of the sort of menopause multivitamins out there. I can't bear to say their names, but there are plenty of them on the shelf. I would just say, though, if you're taking HRT, don't also take a menopause supplement, because they kind of stops the balance of the HRT being as easy to manage, because they sort of boost your estrogen a bit, and then you're already taking HRT, so it's a bit difficult to balance it. So either or at that stage. But from a I'm a fan of supplements. So from a supplement perspective, most people actually, women and men, but most of us are deficient in things like magnesium. So magnesium is a great add-in, really good for sleep, good for your bones. You know, it's just good for relaxation. And just particularly if people are quite anxious, which is another symptom, then that can help. So good to add in a magnesium anyway. Things like omega-3 is really good because it's anti-inflammatory for the gut. The gut is quite badly affected when we're low in estrogen. You'll often find you're bloated, constipated, then you've got diarrhea the next day. Women are diagnosed with IBS 1,000,001 times a day, I'm sure, and actually a lot of it is low estrogen. So magnesium, omega-3, B12 is a great add-in, and vitamin D, obviously, we know what vitamin D does, great add-in. And if you are just, let's say you're having hot flushes or night sweats, you don't want to take HRT yet, a really good supplement to have, and I will mention the name because I do like them, and no, I'm not paid to recommend them, which I seem to say a lot, is a supplement. It's a sage supplement called Menopausal. I think you can get it from Holland & Barrett or Boots, and sage is excellent at helping with things like hot flushes and night sweats. And I remember years ago I took that. But please, ladies, do not buy the quirky little things like stick this magnet in your pants, which is the menopause magnet is a big thing. I have mine. I bought one years ago to test it many years ago, and it's on my whiteboard as a magnet. So just don't buy.
Yeah, I've heard of these magnets. Carly was just going to ask, actually, is it okay to take magnesium with HRT? She has a higher dose to help with migraines, and I take magnesium, and vitamin D is another one that I like to, make sure that I'm taking. But yeah, I agree. It's a case of absolutely, you need to look at your lifestyle as well. I think I definitely have had to have a look at my work patterns. I am definitely not as bright and breezy in the mornings as I may have used to be, and I've had to slow it down, and I'm not going to be getting up before 7 a.m. I'm sorry, it doesn't work for me anymore, and I need to go to bed earlier. My sleep, I think last night I worked out at 10, I had 9.5 hours sleep, and I still felt tired this morning, and I'm like, what is it? So my body is, when we go through these changes, just listen to your body more. If you need to take a bath more frequently or get out in nature more, those things, of course, definitely. I think my biggest as I've been going on this journey, and I have, I've incorporated testosterone as well now, which learning about that, I was like, really, and also the fact that I've had to kind of learn about the fact that it's not actually like licensed properly here, and all of these things. I've had to learn all of these things. But just be curious. Just be curious about what am I actually feeling, and stop fobbing yourself off and thinking, oh, well, that's just me. That's just life. Oh, I'm a busy person. I'm running a business. I've got a family, blah, blah, blah. Of course I feel like this. No, you don't have to. You can get some support and help. And maybe if we just start this conversation a bit more, then you can see if, because we do feel like we're going a bit mad. I think someone else said, I'm going mad. I'm booking a doctor's appointment. They said, I feel like I'm going mad. I'm also loving the fact that today we've managed to fit in vagina, Viagra, constipation, diarrhea into a Bookkeepers podcast. Yes. I'm loving that we've got to talk all about this. And actually, Kirsty's just said testosterone's the missing link. We had a conversation at Accountex about it, and that's why I started. So this is brilliant. We need to have the conversations more, talk about it, and not feel ashamed that we're going through this. It's been really great to start this conversation today with you, Jane, and actually understand some of these the things that maybe sometimes conversations move so fast. It was really great for Zoe to say, hold on a minute, go back. What does all these things mean? Because you go down the road, a bit like running a bookkeeping business. We sometimes have conversations and we go, hold on, we've got to take this back to the beginning again, because these people won't understand what what we're talking about. So, and we've had a conversation about that, about our communities. Keep bringing it back to the beginning, because there's going to be new people that want to have that conversation at that point. Jane, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a great and a breath of fresh air compared to talking about software and graphs. We don't talk about graphs often, but it's been really good to just open up this conversation and make this, our community a safe space to have these conversations about this. And obviously we don't, it's not about giving advice. It's just about being supportive and saying it's okay to think you're going a bit mental. We all feel the same, and we're hurting more than we did. And maybe there's a conversation to be had with a healthcare professional about it, and you don't have to suffer alone.
Perfect. Thank you for having me. And you know where I am if you need any advice. Free group, please join me in the HRT Truth Collective.
Remind us what it's called, the HRT Truth Collective.
HRT Truth Collective on Facebook. And you'll also be able to find it on the website, which is Menopausal Not Mad.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much, Jane. Thanks everyone who's joined and got involved in the conversation. It's all about conversations. We'll see you next time for another episode of the Bookkeepers podcast. Take care. Bye.
Bye.